Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Dimitri Johnson, and you're listening to MMALatestNews.com.
It's time to roll, baby.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to MMA Latest. I'm here with James Sweetener, and we're here to recap, of course, Robert Whittaker versus Darren Till. I know this was a fight both of us were almost dreading, but also equally excited for, as it was your favourite fighter, Robert Whittaker, of course, going up against the Englishman. Darren Till, how was you feeling Saturday night when you was getting ready to watch this one?
I mean, anybody who's watched this channel before, Mitch, knows I absolutely adore Robert Whittaker. I think he's a fantastic fighter. I think he's an equally fantastic man, Mitch. There's something so nice about him, so homely, so warm. I think he's a fantastic fighter, and he's been in so many wars, hasn't he, with Romero? And I think everybody got behind him on that middleweight run when he was taking out, the likes of Brunson and Jacare. He had those two fights with Romero. Everybody liked him. I think all the hardcore fans enjoy watching Robert Whittaker fight. I don't think he's got that mass appeal to the wider audience, but the hardcores absolutely adore him. Of course, obviously, he's got a big Australian fan base as well. I mean, it goes without saying. I mean, that Gastelum fight, obviously, it didn't take place, but that was pretty much sold out. I mean, 52,000 at the Marvel Stadium, whatever it was. He's a big draw out there. But no, I think he's a fantastic fighter. As for Darren Till, and this is the reason why I was dreading this fight, because we both talk about the fact that it's never nice to see two of your favourite fighters fight each other. And Darren Till is somebody who I've warmed to a great deal in recent times. Since that fight with Jorge Masvidal, I liked how open and honest he was with dealing with a loss. You won't get many a fighter who would say, look, I was terrified to step into the octagon again. I was really nervous. And I think that goes a long way with fighters because they have to put on this big macho bravado when really we're all human beings and we're all scared to get in a cage. Let's be honest, bitch. You can get knocked out in 5 seconds like Ben Askren did by Jorge Masvidal. It's a daunting prospect to step into the octagon against all those people. So I think Darren Till speaking up and talking about his mentality going into this fight, it went a long way. But yeah, we went into this fight and I was supporting Whittaker purely based on the fact that I think he needed to win a little bit more. Darren Till is so young in his career, and I know they're around a similar age, but it's more of a miles on the clock thing. Robert Whittaker's reached the summit. Darren Till is yet to get there. And I think Till, he's such a huge star. He's got such a big personality. He's got this English fan base. And I think Dana White's going to push him no matter what. And he can afford to lose a couple. He can. Look at Michael Bisping, a British fighter, lost 7 times before getting the shot against Luke Rockhold. Darren Till has stepped up on a few occasions. He's been beaten in most of them. And I'll include the Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fight in that because I don't think he won it. But he's proven that he can very much mix it at that world-class level. And with a bit more experience, I'm really not putting it past Darren Till becoming the second British UFC champion. But going in, I think Robert Whittaker needed this one more. And when people were asking me who I think was going to win the fight, I mean, I thought at his best Whittaker would win it, but I felt he needed to be at his best. And he showed glimmers of his best on Saturday night. I felt after the 2 wars for Romero and the fact that, let's face it, he got the game plan hopelessly wrong against Adesanya. Don't get me wrong, we're not going to take away from a brilliant performance it was from Israel, but at the same time, Whittaker just got it wrong. He's tried to strike with one of the best, kickboxers in the UFC, a former kickboxing world champion, when Robert Whittaker's got, Commonwealth level wrestling, and he decided not to use that. He mixed it up a lot better against Darren Till. He used that wrestling, and I think it was ultimately his wrestling that won in the fight. It was a terrific main event, a terrific contest. And Mitch, what did you make of the fight as a whole?
I thought it was a brilliant fight. I was almost get me ready to sign up for part 2 of that. I think the fact that these two, Darren Till, I think he's matured a lot since that loss against Masvidal. I think we saw him get pushed too quickly against the welterweights, and he got that shot against Tyron Woodley a bit too soon. And I think maybe on that night he probably thought, I'm probably still better, but it was just the luck of the draw on that night. Whereas the one against Masvidal, he came out, and obviously we saw the build-up in the Gastelum fight. He was trying to feign injury or looking for ways to not make that walk. But this fight was very much, to me, the battle of mentality, who came in on the night. And I think Darren Till was right in terms of what they said, that they're both winners on the night. Although the official win went to Whittaker, I think both of them can hold their heads up very high. And I think maybe six months to a year down the line, we might be revisiting this fight once more.
Yeah, I think both men's stock rose because they were both fantastic, and they've both been fantastic ambassadors of the sport. I'd like to comment, I thought it was a bit of a gangster move by Darren Till coming out to no music. And I'm quite happy as well that Robert Whittaker went back to Can't Be Touched by Roy Jones as his walkout music, because, you know, I'm a big fan of people sticking with their walkout music. I like that iconic theme song around a fighter. But I thought both men fought fantastically. And I think, Mitch, we need to get into the scoring at this one because it caused some controversy. I've seen most people went for Robert Whittaker. I've seen a few went for Darren Till as well. And personally, how I scored it, obviously the first round, it went towards Darren Till. He got a big knockdown with that elbow. Robert Whittaker in a hint of trouble. In the second round, Whittaker got a knockdown of his own, a big right hand. Darren Till was on the canvas, and he unloaded some nasty ground and pound, and he used that wrestling control that he's got, that ground control. Third round, again, I edged towards Robert Whittaker. Fourth round towards Darren Till. I felt Dan Hardy was slightly harsh on Till throughout. I think he made it sound like Whittaker was absolutely running away with it. And for me, he wasn't. I thought it was a very, very close fight, and it was balanced on a knife edge going into the fifth. I was edging it towards Darren Till throughout, and then Robert Whittaker landed those 2 takedowns. And for me, that was enough to seal it for the Australian. I agreed with the judges' decision. I had Robert Whittaker winning. How did you score it, Mitch?
Yeah, I agree. I know there was a couple of tweets, going around as we seem to have every fight card that is a Robert, but I did have Whittaker winning it. The way I scored it, I didn't score those takedowns at the end for Whittaker just purely because Till got up straight away. So I gave Till 1 and 5. Obviously, we knew Whittaker got number 2. 3 and 4 are the ones that I was struggling with, but I did give Till number 4, I believe. Oh no, I gave Till number 3 because I thought we did a little bit more, despite having, Whittaker had the activity going in that round, and I felt Whittaker pulled it out that fourth round. But I did sort of go into the fight predicting that we'd one see a knockdown apiece, and 2 that we were going into the fifth round with it very close, and more or less two apiece going into that fifth round. So it was a very good fight, and I have no qualms with how it's been scored.
Yeah, I agree. It went towards Whittaker. What I will say is some controversy that has arose from the fight is those leg stomps. And, of course, Whittaker landed a perfect one on Darren Till. That's injured him. And a lot of people want them to be made illegal. I'm personally against that because, Mitch, at the end of the day, this is a fight. I mean, we've got enough rules as it is. I'm absolutely content with leg stomps being legal. What do you think?
It has become part of the game plan, isn't it? It's almost become like calf kicks. You want calf kicks to become illegal now because they come so predominant in the sport. 3 calf kicks and the calf is gone. It's become such a utilised weapon. Those leg stomps, they work. They keep that that fighter at bay, so to speak. And Till's knee went in the second round, and he didn't look the same. And that is probably what got Whittaker to win. Had Till been 100% going to those latter rounds, we could have seen a different fight.
Absolutely, we could have been. But at the end of the day, you've got to remember that Robert Whittaker made that injury happen. I mean, I saw a few people going, well, what would have happened if Till hadn't have got injured? Well, ultimately, he did, and Robert Whittaker caused the injury. So we can't say if, buts, and maybes. That is what happened. Whittaker caused that injury, and he deserves credit for causing that injury because that's what you're meant to do in a fight. And what I want to talk about is where both men go next, because I think it's very interesting, and I think it very much relies on the result of Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa. I know Robert Whittaker wants that rematch with Adesanya. As much as I'd love to see him get redemption, for me, the first fight was too one-sided towards Adesanya, in my opinion, to do an immediate rematch. But if Paulo Costa wins, I think there's every chance in the world we get Costa versus Whittaker. I think that'd be a great matchup. If Israel Adesanya retains the belt, like a lot of people expect him to do, the forgotten man of the division, the man who I think deserves a shot, is Jared Cannonier. He's coming off 2 great wins. One that's against a legend in Anderson Silva. A second against Jack Hermansson, which is now looking a lot better considering Hermansson just submitted Gastelum in, about 75 seconds. So Adesanya wins, you've got to give it Cannonier. Costa wins, I think you can edge towards Whittaker. What do you think, Mitch?
Yeah, so very tough one. As you said, Jared Cannonier is the forgotten man in that division. Jack Hermansson's probably the flavour of the month just because the recency bias that you get in MMA. The fact that he submitted Kelvin Gastelum, who was, only last year he was going to challenge Whittaker for that title and was in an interim title fight that was fight of the year. So we could have been looking at this. Gastelum's had a very upsetting year, I can imagine to him. If you look how he started 2019 and now how he is, 12, 14 months later, it's horrendous. But I feel like with Darren Till, we almost pre-booked the title fight against Adesanya going into it, similarly how we did against Ben Askren. Obviously, if Darren Till going into that fight against Masvidal, everyone was saying, "Oh, we're going to have Till versus Askren next." And it doesn't go like that way. MMA isn't a sport where you go, "That's 100% going to happen." But as you say, I think Paulo Costa Adesanya, hopefully for me, I'm hoping Adesanya goes through, and wins that fight and defends his title. I'd like to see that Whittaker rematch. Depends on what, because I think Whittaker as a challenger is a very hungry competitor, and if his mentality is in the right spot, it would be interesting. But as you said, the fight was very one-sided towards Adesanya, so it would be difficult to reboot that one. It's a difficult one. Either Jack Hermansson or Jared Cannonier for me.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Jack Hermansson again deserves he's edging towards a shot. You have to go for Cannonier over Hermansson because Cannonier, of course, beat Hermansson. And Cannonier is somebody who I think is very marketable. He's got a good personality, he speaks well on the mic, he's got an exciting fighting style. So it sort of bewilders me that the UFC don't seem to be interested in pushing him. As for who Till fights next, I mean, he could fight the loser of Adesanya versus Costa. Or do we be very naughty, Mitch, and book him in with Romero? I think that'd be an exciting contest.
Well, first of all, we've got this week Derek Brunson fighting, isn't he, against Edmund. I can't say his second name, so we'll just call him Edmund for now. So I think we'll talk about he gets the loser of that or the winner of that fight. But again, we've got Uriah Hall versus Yoel Romero coming up soon. So if Uriah Hall,
yes, that is booked. You're right.
If Uriah Hall wins that bout, do Uriah Hall versus Darren Till. That would be a very exciting fight. Equally exciting as maybe Till versus Brunson if Brunson gets the win.
Yeah, absolutely. And Uriah Hall is somebody who, if at his best, can cause a lot of problems in that division. I think everybody expected him to rise to stardom after that Ultimate Fighter win. I think a lot of people will remember, I think it was a spinning head kick knockout that he got, and Dana White was raving about it. We thought Uriah Hall was like this next video game Anderson Silva type character. Wasn't meant to be, unfortunately, for Uriah, but if he bags a couple of wins, I mean, a win over Romero, I think is Romero third in the rankings? That'll catapult Uriah Hall way up the rankings, so a fight with Darren Till is very possible.
Yeah, he's fourth in the moment. Fourth in the rankings, Romero, obviously coming off the very poor title challenge against Adesanya. Darren Till's fifth in the rankings, whether he drops down probably to sixth because of Jack Hermansson's win. And obviously Kelvin Gastelum's in seventh as I'm looking at him now. And Derek Brunson and Edmund Shaybazian, I'm guessing it is. Sorry, I'm so sorry. But hey, we will learn that one for the future. But, they're just below him and Uriah Hall's in 10th. So it is really, really tight up there. And whoever wins could probably put themselves in with Darren Till.
Absolutely. There's so much going on in the middleweight division. It's one of the best. And I'm hoping, as a fan of Bobby, that he can emerge as a world champion once again. It'd be lovely. And then somewhere down the line, Darren Till can have a pop at a world title as well. That'd be perfect for the middleweight division for me.
Definitely, Robert Whittaker's still supposed to fight in Australia, isn't he? He's had 2 fights cancelled there in recent.
Yeah. He fought Derek Brunson, didn't he, in Australia? And I think that was his last fight there because he had the Luke Rockhold one cancelled. Then, of course, he had the Kelvin Gastelum one. Oh, no, of course, he fought Adesanya in Australia.
Oh, yeah, it was, wasn't it?
At the Marvel stand. I don't know what we're talking about, Mitch. We completely lost it. Calling ourselves pundits for a joke.
That feels so long ago now. It was only a year ago.
Yeah, it's not even a year. It was October, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy.
I remember crying on the watch-along.
What was the more ballsy move? Adesanya coming out dancing or Till coming out in silence?
Till coming out in silence. Adesanya thought he was something from diversity. Till's was a little bit more daunting, like the old Mike Tyson days.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, that's true. And obviously, that dance was in front of 60,000 people, whereas Till came out in about, 20, 30 people. A lot
Absolutely.
more embarrassing had Adesanya lost that fight.
It would have been more embarrassing if Adesanya came out dancing in front of 30 people like Till did. But obviously, I'm of a perspective of wanting Robert Whittaker to regain the belt, to beat all the challenges, etc., etc. Your man, Israel Adesanya, he's your favourite fighter. He's top of the tree at the moment. And I'm assuming you want him to dispatch of Costa and Gastelum again, and Till and Whittaker and Cannonier and Hermansson and the lot.
Till's the most conflicting one, obviously, because I'd love to see another UK champion. So, and Adesanya versus Till, especially with their back and forth over the past couple of months, that for me is the most exciting fight to see. But again, I feel sorry for Whittaker because he almost got thrown into his first title. Bisping was the champion. We had the interim title fight, which Whittaker rightfully won. They had that back and forth inside the octagon where Bisping threw him the real bit and said, right, you have this one, I'll come back and get it from you. And obviously, of course, GSP then came into the division, took the belt, retired, and it went rightfully back to Whittaker. But he never really got an official, he never got that official defense because of Romero missed weight. And the mentality or the mental side of that game got too much for him. So it'd be interesting to see, a bit like Rose Namajunas, if they got a second crack at it, how it would go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Robert Whittaker's mental game has far improved. You could tell he wasn't himself in that Israel Adesanya fight, and he was talking about running across the sand dunes and just not feeling mentally right. So he had to stop. He had to have a break. And hopefully during that break, he'll have revitalised himself and he'll be back towards his best, because he was so good, wasn't he, when he was dispatching of everybody at middleweight. And hopefully he can get back to that, and hopefully he can give Adesanya a more competitive fight, Mitch.
Definitely, you know, he's shown what is an elite fighter, and he's a former world champion, and he deserves to be on that spot again. And I know he said recently, he started taking Sundays off, and he has said to his team, once things get a little bit too much for him, that he's just taking it down 10-20% and taking it a little lighter, which in the long run probably does him better, because he is only 29 years old and still got his best years ahead of him.
Absolutely. I think I would completely agree with you. He's got so much more left to give, Mitch. I really agree. And I just want to touch on that Darren Till point you made. He was very much rushed, wasn't he? He jumped up in levels of what Cowboy Cerrone and dispatched of him in fantastic fashion. And then there were so many rumours over who would he fight at that UFC Liverpool card. And he was flung in against Thompson, which for me at that time was just too many levels above him. But obviously the fight wasn't a complete masterclass by Thompson, but Thompson won it quite comfortably. And then off the back of a comfortable loss, he was flung in with Tyron Woodley. And then, so he's fought people before he was ready, but luckily since that, I mean, he was winning the Masvidal fight. You know, he beat Kelvin Gastelum, albeit a close fight. He's competing against Robert Whittaker. He's forever improving. So I think the best of Robert Whittaker's yet to come. And we keep talking about our next British UFC champion. What are the updates on Leon Edwards at the moment? Because he just seems like the forgotten man, because it looks like Tyron Woodley's going to get booked against Colby Covington. Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman are squaring off for the title. Who on earth is Edwards going to fight?
You know, we just finished Fight Island, and the amount of European and British talent that we had on show, and you know, Leon Edwards was the one that stuck out not being on that event. And I feel sorry for him. You know, he was supposed to. We said this before. Back in March, he should have got that Woodley fight, and then he probably would have fought Usman for the title had things, you know, gone down the time that they had. And he got the luck of the green. You know, as you said, he's probably going to get a steal and wonder by Thompson. The Masvidal fight is on the cards, but again, Masvidal, they probably don't want to give Masvidal, you know, 2 losses on the bounce or being at risk of another loss. So I probably see Masvidal Thompson 2 happening, and maybe you give Edwards. It's a difficult one to see. Maybe give him a Jeff Neal or someone, or Vicente Luque's fighting this weekend. Maybe give him someone who's a bit further down the rankings. It's unfair, and it's not what he deserves. He deserves Kamaru Usman, rightfully so, or at least Gilbert Burns, and we determined the true number 1 contender. Yeah,
I think with Masvidal, we talk about not wanting to get another loss, but I've always seen him as somewhat below the absolute elite. I think he goes in an underdog against any of those names. I mean, people think he'll breeze past Wonderboy now. I'd make Wonderboy a slight favourite. I'd make Edwards a favourite. All those elite pinnacle names, the likes of Usman, the likes of Covington, etc., the likes of Burns even, I think they all go in a slight favourite over Masvidal. So if you wanted to protect him, as much as I don't want to see it, because the fight was so one-sided, you need to stick him in with a Diaz or look to make big-name fights. I mean, what is it, welterweight? Could you fling Mike Perry in there? Obviously, Mike Perry doesn't necessarily deserve it. I'm not saying he does, but Mike Perry sells the fight excellently, and surely that would apply to a more casual market.
Definitely, I think, you know, obviously, the obvious name is Conor McGregor. You know, those two at the moment seem to be, well, most definitely the 2 biggest money makers at the moment. And, you know, without things are at the moment, you don't want to put that fight in an empty arena. That would be on almost business suicide in a way. But it's a really difficult one. Obviously, he's not going to fight Tyron Woodley. Woodley and Covington should be the one that happens. Maybe you can try and get Edwards Woodley for the end of the year. But it seems like Woodley doesn't want to fight at the moment.
Yeah, nobody wants to fight Leon Edwards, and Tyron Woodley doesn't seem to want to fight full stop. I mean, if I was Tyron Woodley, I would not bother going in with Colby Covington. He's lost so decisively to Usman and Burns. I can only see it happening again against Colby Covington. And there wasn't much of an element of rivalry in the Usman fight or the Burns fight. With this one, there really is. And do you want to get absolutely ragdolled by one of your biggest rivals? You don't. So if I was Tyron Woodley, I'd take some time off and I'd seriously contemplate potentially retiring from the sport. Because if mentally he's not there anymore, then he shouldn't be competing at the highest level. And somebody who was as good as Tyron Woodley in his prime, he doesn't deserve to slide down those rankings. I mean, he's got a good career in terms of his celebrity life. You know, he's competing on the Rocks, Titan Games at the moment. He has his rap career. I potentially, if I was Tyron Woodley, I'd probably focus on that.
Yeah, you know what? If I'm Tyron Woodley, he's 36, 37 now. So he is at the tail end of his career, and he's had an amazing career. You know, some call him the greatest welterweight of all time, or at least second to GSP. At the moment, how things stand, Kamaru Usman probably will catch up and overtake that spot. But, you know, it's, you know, as you said, he's big with TMZ, he's big over in the States, he's got his rap career going on. And you could see him doing some sort of show, you know, being a host of some sort of show like the Contender Series or The Ultimate Fighter, something of that nature. You could see him on a Netflix original probably.
Absolutely, I agree with you, Mitch. I think there's so many options for him in terms of his career. When we look back at it, though, I've always felt he was somewhat overrated. Don't get me wrong, great champion, but the narrative that he was as good as GSP or even better than GSP was just ridiculous to me. And I hate when these new fighters come through, they get 3 or 4 wins. We forget about the greats. We completely dismiss them. That Tyron Woodley's better than GSP, that Max Holloway's better than Jose Aldo, except we can't just we can't completely forget about the reigns of like these all-time great fighters. Like we don't go, Tyson Fury's better than Muhammad Ali just right off the bat. Don't get me wrong, Tyson Fury's an elite fighter, he's proven himself, but you can't just go after 2 fights, you're better than the greatest of all time. You can't. You need to have a long reign as the champion, Mitch, for me to be considered the greatest of all time in your weight division. I mean, he beat Robbie Lawler, fantastic. Fought Stephen Thompson, it was a draw. I personally thought Woodley won that night. The rematch, he got the win. However, I thought Wonderboy won that one. So I actually thought they split a winner piece, but whatever, he keeps holding the belt. He fights Damian Maia, beats Maia. Impressive, obviously, but a lot of people did that. Usman did the same thing. Covington did the same thing. And then, of course, he fought Till, but Till was vastly inexperienced and coming off a loss anyway. So as good as that reign was, I don't feel he's the greatest of all time. I think Matt Hughes, again, is in the mix, obviously behind GSP. And I think, of course, Kamaru Usman now is better than Tyron Woodley. Kamaru Usman, who's he just beat? He's defeated Colby Covington, who's absolutely fantastic. As much as we all hate him, Colby Covington looked amazing against Rafael dos Anjos and Robbie Lawler. And then, of course, he's absolutely dismantled Masvidal, who's one of the biggest stars in the sport. So I personally would have Usman ahead of Woodley in those all-time great rankings.
Yeah, I think he's up there. I think he's probably one defense from that. But the way that he took the belt from Woodley, and as you say, the 2 defenses he's made since then has been phenomenal. And he looks one scary dude. You know, he might not be the best setter, but you know, you let your hands almost do the talking inside the octagon, and that's how you're going to get your patience. It isn't about, you know, you get a show fee and a win fee, and being a champion is make sure you maximise getting the both of those.
Yeah, Kamaru Usman's never going to be the biggest star in the sport. He's just not. He's coming off the back of one of the biggest pay-per-views of all time, 1.3 million buys, but it was Masvidal who sold that fight. His next fight against Burns isn't going to do massive pay-per-view buys. Don't get me wrong, it's a massively intriguing fight, and I'm personally looking forward to it. It's not going to make Usman a mainstream star, rather. But for those of us who love the sport, that's a fantastic contest for us to watch. And I'm really looking forward to Usman Burns. I think stylistically it's fantastic. Will Usman just be able to bully somebody who has the high-level jiu-jitsu of a Gilbert Burns? Is he just going to try and take it to the fence? Is he going to try and take it to the ground? I mean, I'm assuming he'll try and avoid the ground, obviously, because of Burns' jiu-jitsu game. But I think it's an intriguing fight. I'm looking forward to it.
Definitely. You know, there's one welterweight who shocked the world recently. It's Khamzat Chimaev. Many are thinking he could be the one to dethrone Kamaru Usman. Obviously, he's broke the record now. You know, back-to-back victories in 10 days. Khamzat Chimaev, he made his debut on that Wednesday card at Fight Island, and I saw a stat from ESPN. He's about 192 strikes to about 2 in terms of his 2 fights. In terms of strikes he's landed, he looks one scary monster, don't he?
Absolutely, he looks fantastic, Mitch. I think he's a brilliant prospect for the future. But again, we need to settle down a little bit. You can't beat 2 unranked guys and then we go, yeah, this guy's gonna beat Usman. We just can't do it. Usman's fantastic. Usman's a great fighter, an elite fighter, and we can't just fling these prospects in with him willy-nilly. This guy's gonna work his way up the rankings, beat the top 15, get himself into the top 10. He might have a few losses along the way. It's a long road to become the best in the UFC, Mitch. You can't do it overnight.
Definitely not. And you know, the fact, you know, a lot of people calling him Khabib 2.0 or Swedish Khabib. You know, I'm hoping he rightfully gets the respect he deserves, because that fight against John Phillips, and of course the other night against the debutant in Reece McKee, you know, he looked phenomenal. And as you mentioned Mike Perry earlier, that's the fight I want to see. Chimaev absolutely more Mike Perry, who's now going to become a father, of course. Maybe not more than too much, but that's the fight that I want to see.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good matchup for him. Obviously, it'd be the hardest contest of his career by a clear mile. But Mike Perry, I don't want to see him getting mauled. I don't want to see him being used to build prospects up. I want to see Mike Perry in absolute wars with his girlfriend in the corner. I want to see him fighting other strikers. I want to see like a Masvidal fight. I want to see that Hood matchup. Yeah, absolutely. The Darren Till fight's obviously one that potentially could happen. Obviously, they're in different weight divisions at the moment. But obviously, it's not been mentioned at all by the UFC, but I've just started talking about it today, and I've actually really warmed to the idea of Masvidal, Mike Perry. Yes, Masvidal, huge favourite, but could you imagine the build-up between those two? Do you think it'd be absolutely phenomenal? You've got Masvidal wearing his Scarface ski, you've got Mike Perry with his girlfriend in the corner. Do you not think it'd just be a great blend of personalities?
Oh, that's almost as crazy as Tyson versus Roy Jones again. Put it on the same card.
But absolutely, I mean, Jake Paul's on that undercard as well. Let's just have a massive fiesta of ridiculous fights. Honestly, though, could you stick the BMF title on the line for like a Mike Perry Hogan? Let's do it. Let's get this going. I'm going to stop rolling the bandwagon. Get this clip out. Masvidal versus Mike Perry. I know there's a very clear favourite in that fight, Mitch, but you don't think it would be absolutely superb? Imagine the war those two men are going through. Probably Masvidal comes out with a win, but that's not the point. It'd be fun.
Would be the highlight of that fight. It would be tremendous, maybe a Nate Diaz, because Mike Perry, as much as you may dislike him, his personality does sell fights, and he can very much antagonize himself and use that maybe against someone like a Nate Diaz or Robbie Lawler, Jorge Masvidal, these elite almost BMFs in their rightful mind, and they're BMF by name and they deserve it. But yeah, to be fair, 2020, anything could happen. If we see Perry and Masvidal, Masvidal in 2020, I'm not going to be shocked anymore.
Absolutely. I mean, I think even you're beginning to liken this idea, Mitch. I think at the start you're like, that's ridiculous change. You can't pitch Masvidal against the guy who's just beat Mickey Gall, but I can. And I can and I will, because I think it'd be absolutely tremendous. The press conference would be brilliant. The face-offs. Could you imagine the gloves are off between those two? They'd just be talking complete Hood references. I wouldn't understand any of it, but I'd love it. In fact, let's just do it in the backyard.
Why not? Let's do it in bare knuckle.
Absolutely. I'd live for it, Mitch. I'd live for it.
As long as it's 3 rounds, I'll take it. Yeah, we'll take it. I'm sold now.
I don't even want it. I don't want it as a co-main event, Mitch. I want it as a pay-per-view headliner for the BMF belt. Genuinely, if that comes together, hypothetically, and we've got press conferences, documentaries, face-off, maybe a Glover off or counterpunch, as the UFC like to call it, tell me it doesn't do a million buys if we do the right promotional push behind it. Get Masvidal on Conan.
It would do some absolute numbers, especially if you just did a talk show and Mike Perry and Masvidal sat either side of the host. It would get trended on Twitter pretty quickly.
It would do, because like Masvidal would be throwing bombs at Mike Perry and Conan would be like in the air like terrified, or Jimmy Kimmel, or even Ellen. Let's get them on daytime Los Angeles TV squared off of each other. I think it'd be tremendous, Mitch.
I think they'd be accepted on daytime TV. The bleep machine would break. Absolutely.
Even get them on Jeremy Kyle. I mean, there's been enough going on in Mike Perry's life.
Jesus, we won't get into that one, but yeah, you could. That might be the TV show for him at the moment.
Absolutely. Or the Jerry Springer show. They'd love to brawl on that.
Dr. Phil in the house.
Absolutely. You'd have like Mike Perry's girlfriend squaring off against Masvidal's girlfriend or something ridiculous.
Talking about fights, we did see Dan Hardy versus Herb Dean. They got into a bit of an entanglement at the weekend. Jai Herbert took an unfortunate third-round knockout off, doing very well in his UFC debut against Trinaldo. He won the 30 rounds in my eyes, but how did you feel about that? Did you think Dan Hardy was right to come out so not aggressively but so passionately towards Herb Dean during the broadcast?
Yeah, well, firstly, we're booking Hardy versus Dean for the co-main event of Perry Masvidal, but if I'm going to talk seriously for a minute, for me the stoppage was late, Mitch. I think he was very clearly knocked out. Yes, Herb Dean has a point in terms of he did have his hands in the air as if he was going to defend himself. But when those strikes started landing, it was clear he was just doing it off instinct, Mitch. The guy was as good as gone. It was over. And Herb Dean's responsibility is to protect the fighters. And I think he had another late stoppage as well on that night. He's one of the best in the business, Herb Dean. Absolutely no doubt about that. But he got this one wrong for me, Mitch. He got it wrong. He had to jump in. Herbert wasn't being protected. He wasn't protecting himself, so it was Herb Dean's job to do it. Dan Hardy, yes, slightly unprofessional. He shouldn't have been arguing with Herb Dean live on the UFC broadcast. I think we heard glimmers of Hardy saying, I'm doing my job, you do yours, something along those lines. But at the same time, as unprofessional as maybe you could argue it is, Dan Hardy's very emotionally connected to this. Dan Hardy's been a professional fighter himself. Dan Hardy's been in the end of knockout losses himself. I think it was Carlos Condit that knocked out Dan Hardy very badly. And you don't want to see fights take more than necessary. You really don't. So Dan Hardy has to think of it in terms of, I've been in there. Therefore, he cares about these fighters. He knows what they're going for. He knows that they've got families at home. If you take far too many strikes on the ground, that can be career-ending, Mitch. Or even if you do get to another fight, it can worsen your chin. Your chin can go before it should do in a fight. So I can see where Dan Hardy was coming from.
Definitely, I will put it out there and say I did think it was a late stoppage by 3 or 4 strikes easily. I do feel for her. Well, I feel for Herb Dean. I can see his point of view where we've seen that so many times where a fighter does get knocked down, and for a flash second or two we go, oh, they're out, and then they scramble too, and they're able to defend themselves and they come back and they bring themselves back into the fight. But in fact, I think the major point is that Trinaldo stopped punching. He knew that at that point the fight was done. At that point, I think Herb Dean, he hesitated there. And it's that point when the fighter, the opponent who's trained to say, don't stop punching until the ref stood in, once he almost gave Herbert mercy there, that's when it becomes a real talking point. And again, Dan Hardy is right. I think you have to take the professionalism out of it because he is a fighter or former fighter, depending on when he makes a return. He's been in there and he has been knocked out, so he knows the consequences of what could happen there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Herbert, if we actually look at the stoppage, Herbert goes down, then it should have been stopped.
Yeah.
Of course, Ronaldo runs over, gets ready to punch him again. If Herbert was conscious, he would have made it. Yes, of course, he has his hands in the air. He would have made an attempt to grab a leg. He would have made an attempt to do something, and he does nothing. And Herb Dean ignores that. And then I think it's 3 or 4 strikes that are landed, and he doesn't try and defend them. Yes, he has his arms in the air, but he's not covering his face. He's not tucking up. He's not looking to get back to his feet. He's taking punches, and Herb Dean does nothing. And that's where we have the issue. And Herb Dean released that statement, I think, on Instagram, a 2-part video trying to explain his actions, trying to explain that it was a good stoppage. He stuck behind it. He didn't apologise for it. He stuck by it. And unfortunately for me in this one, if Herb Dean can look back at that and think it's a good stoppage, it's a serious problem.
Yeah, and he's having a couple build up on him. The Ben Askren and Robbie Lawler one comes to mind when you think of poor stoppage. And I think he probably is second or third best in the business. I think Mark Goddard is quite clearly number 1, but Herb Dean probably comes up second quite quick, or at least third. Dan Merkley is a great referee. And we've got some upcomers as well that are slowly building their name into the referee game, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of good referees at the moment. But if we look back at that Robbie Lawler Ben Askren stoppage, there's a case for why it could have been stopped. People want to slate Ben Askren as much as they want, but Lawler wasn't getting out of that in a month for Sundays. And Lawler dropped his hand. Mm-hmm. There was a case to stop that. Whereas this weekend, there wasn't much of a case to let it keep going.
Who was the referee for Askren and Masvidal?
I can't remember, Mitchell, but I don't think there was any doubt about that one.
No, but obviously, in a sense, you could say, Masvidal punched him a couple times on the ground, but I think the fact that it was so quick, he almost got away with that one because the referee was on the other side of the octagon, expecting the fight to have a more normal start, so to speak.
Absolutely. After 5 or 10 seconds, he was expecting Masvidal to be on the ground, receiving a bit of ground and pound of Askren. It did not go that way on the night, Mitch. It goes without saying. But, if you're a referee, you can't be held too bad for those extra punches because nobody was expecting that to end after 3 seconds. Well, 5 seconds, but I think that knee landed after 2.
Definitely, but in comparison to Saturday nights, it is a bad one. And the fact that he's come out and stuck by it is a little worrying. But I guess as a referee, you almost have to, if you question yourself too much, that might put fighters in more harm than good.
Absolutely. Herb Dean needs to continue to believe in himself because we talk about all the pressure that fighters face on the night. There's a lot of pressure for referees as well, Mitch. They're in a huge situation. Eyes are on them to do the right thing. You don't want to stop a fight too soon. You don't want to stop a fight too late. So Herb Dean mentally himself needs to keep in a good spirits going forward.
Definitely. And, he is, as we've mentioned, he's one of the best in the game. And hopefully, he did, there was quite a few refs that did every single event over Fight Island. So he's probably shattered himself. And, maybe he wouldn't have made that mistake on that UFC 251 card, which was the first one of Fight Island.
Yeah, you never know, Mitch. But I think we need to touch a little bit on that card that Whittaker and Till did at the weekend. I mean, if you just want to go, I know Paul Craig was excellent, and there was a few good fights on there. Let's look at the co-main event and the fight slightly before that. We'll go with Gustafsson first. I think we were all excited for Gustafsson's heavyweight debut. I was thinking everybody, I think, wants to see Gustafsson become a UFC champion. He was so close against Jones and Cormier. Of course, the second fight with Jones wasn't quite as close. It was pretty decisive. But I was thinking at heavyweight, could he have a little run? Of course, Cormier and Miocic, both set to retire in the not-too-distant future. Who's probably going to take over that mantle? Probably Ngannou. Could Gustafsson beat Ngannou? He's a far better boxer. He was a very elite amateur boxer out in Sweden. He was at a very high level. Could he outskill Ngannou? Potentially. I was hoping and praying. Maybe a bit of bias towards Gustafsson got to like him because I just wanted him to become a UFC champion. I don't want him to be too upset with himself because what happened on Saturday could literally happen to any heavyweight. Anybody who ends up on the deck with Fabricio Verdum is in trouble. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion, and he's impossible to beat in that realm.
Definitely, you don't see a 240-pound man move that quick on the ground too much either. And, once he poured him down onto his back, and you think, no, he's going to get the rear naked choke here. And that's the point where you're really worrying for Gus. But then he laid him out, pulled the arm out, and it was over pretty quickly. But for Gustafsson, I was excited to see him at heavyweight as well. Obviously, he retired in Stockholm after that Anthony Smith loss, and he's taken a good year out and really been able to reassess where he's at mentally for his career, of course. And he started off okay. It wasn't until it got to the ground that you're thinking, this fight's actually going to go quite easy to Verdum. I'm looking here. He put 11 strikes in compared to Verdum's 4, and you can almost say he's almost a bit unlucky from the losing end, even though it was a definitive win for Verdum.
Absolutely, and I think Verdum goes into free agency in a very good position. Will One Championship look for him? Will Bellator look for him? He's coming off a win. He's a former world champion. I think he'll get some pretty attractive offers in the not-too-distant future. And two more legends, Shogun, Nogueira, went to war. Nogueira's going to be very sadly missed. It was a privilege to get to watch these two greats go at it. Personally, though, I thought Nogueira nicked it.
It's a tough one to score. Obviously, I was saying on the pre-show the other night, I was 8 years old the first time these fought, back in 2005. Right? It's ridiculous. 15 years later, they're fighting again. This is actually the first time I've seen them fight, despite, I came into the MMA quite recently in 2016. So I even missed their second fight. So this was quite a refreshing one. This is a fight for the older fans, for the nostalgia. And obviously it was Nogueira's final farewell, so to speak, from MMA. It's a tough one to score. I think he's probably the best he's looked in one of those out of the 3 fights, despite being 44 years of age. It's incredible, the skill and the level that they're at, despite their latter ages. So
absolutely. 2 guaranteed Hall of Fame athletes.
Well, Mauricio is already a Hall of Fame, right?
Is it not just his fight that's in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, because I know he's got a jacket, and I know they'll mention it a couple of times in the broadcast, but yeah, you're right. You're nailed on. They are both Hall of Famers. So, future Hall of Famers.
Yeah, and imagine how much it must pain Nogueira. 2 split decision losses. That can't be easy to handle by any stretch of the imagination. But moving on forward, there's been a huge fight announced today. Khabib, Gaethje, October, it's going down. And even before Gaethje fought Poirier, when he was on that run, when he was beating, the likes of Barboza and James Vick and Cowboy, even then, I remember saying in MMA Latest, and Johnny Rashman, who did the show with us, used to say I was stupid for saying it, but I'm glad I said it, and I'm glad it's on record. I thought Gaethje was going to give Khabib problems even then. I thought he had better striking, and I think he has good enough wrestling to give Khabib problems, to keep it on the feet at the very least. I mean, he's an All-American Justin Gaethje, national champion, a great wrestler in his own right, and it's with sincere regret I say this. Khabib, of course, is going through extremely tough personal issues at the moment. He's just lost his father, his role model, his hero, a very close personal friend who, of course, has guided him through his career. I don't know how mentally any man can be at his best after that's just happened. So, for me, I would have liked to see Khabib take more time, purely to sort of, obviously it's impossible to get over, but to sort of get his head around it, to cope with it. I think it's going to be a very tough ask for Khabib to get in the right mindset come October.
Definitely. I feel for Khabib, and I send out, obviously MMA Latest sends their condolences to him. We know how pivotal his father was to his career. But maybe, hopefully, he can use this sort of energy, so to speak, to carry it with him and push through, and maybe even grow stronger from it. He is the eagle. Maybe he becomes the phoenix this time around and reborn, and use those assets to really cement his legacy. And what a way it would be. This fight. We want to see Gaethje do well, but this fight for Khabib's legacy has so much more meaning to it now.
Yeah, beautifully spoken, Mitch. And if he does beat Gaethje, I wouldn't be against Khabib just calling it a day. He'd be 30-0. He'll have done absolutely everything there is to do in the sport. It'll be a huge tribute to his father. And does Khabib need to prove anything to anybody at this stage? He's already one of the greatest of all time. He's already a future Hall of Famer. What more is there to do?
Yeah, I was going to say maybe put Tony Ferguson and make sure we get a fight, but no, I think we could be seeing the last of Khabib, whether he wins or loses. So obviously, it'll be his first defeat on his record, and I think, you're probably right. I think it would be a good way to go out, and obviously, having lost his mentor, his father, it would be difficult to see him fighting beyond 2020.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mitch. Of course, it'd be nice to see Gaethje win a world title, but I don't think anybody would begrudge Khabib holding onto that belt, not in this current climate at all.
Definitely not, and, to put the sport into perspective, should that happen, should Khabib win and then retire from the belt, maybe put the belt up against McGregor, maybe McGregor Gaethje, that's the fight that was supposed to happen this year. Maybe that does come into it at some point down the line. But as you said, I think all eyes are on Khabib, and he's become that Poirier. You never want to see a Poirier lose. You never want to see a fighter lose, that you're so admirable for. But there's just something more that this fight means more to him now.
Absolutely. I think just as human beings, we relate to that story. Obviously, it was in completely different circumstances, but we've just seen Walt Harris lose a loved one. I think everybody, as much as people like Alistair Overeem, as much as he's a legend of the sport, everybody wanted to see Walt Harris get that victory. And it's the same thing with Khabib. Everybody can relate to that feeling of loss at some point in their life. And of course, it won't make things better. Of course, it won't replace that person. But I think we just want them to see people like that get something positive in their lives, because they can deal with that little extra buzz, that extra thing to motivate them and keep them going, something to focus on.
100%. And, it's October, isn't it? So he's got 3 months now. And I think it'd be interesting to see where the fight takes place. They haven't announced the location. I think it's going to probably be Fight Island as well, with Dana coming out and saying that all the big fights are going to be on Fight Island. But, it does add something special to that fight. To a fight that was already exciting to watch anyway. This fight, for me, is probably a little bit more exciting than Ferguson versus Khabib would have been. Just the fact that Gaethje is probably the better fighter than Ferguson in an aspect that suits, or I say goes against Khabib's style, so to speak.
Yeah, they both offered completely stylistic problems. Of course, they both had better striking than Khabib. Gaethje, of course, is an issue because he can keep that fight on the feet with his takedown defense. Ferguson was an issue because, of course, he had the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to potentially submit Khabib if Khabib got on top. And we talk about Khabib potentially being at his best or not being at his best. I think it can go one of two ways. Of course, he'll struggle, of course, like a lot of us would, dealing with that circumstance, or he might just need something to keep him going, to keep focused on. Sometimes you need something to distract you, and this could be it. And we could see the best Khabib we've seen. We just don't know which way it's going to go. But, Mitch, we all wish Khabib the very best, and Gaethje, of course, the best as well. We just hope that the best man wins on the night.
100%. And I think it'd probably be unlikely, but it'd be nice to see some sort of fan aspect in the crowd, whether it's a 15-20% capacity crowd. Should it be Khabib's last fight, just to give him that sense of deserve? Because he could be one of the very few fighters, maybe even the first fighter, to go and retire undefeated with the record that he holds is, unmatched in MMA and especially UFC at the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with you, Mitch. Gleison Tebow, of course, that was a very close fight. Some people edge towards Tebow, but that doesn't take away from what Khabib's done. Look at the people he's dismantled. Rafael dos Anjos, Conor McGregor, Michael Johnson, Dustin Poirier. Resumes don't get a lot better than that, Mitch.
No, and I think, there's three names that you could probably add to that, which is Gaethje, Ferguson, and GSP. Of course, now GSP he's tested going down to 155, and that probably would be the pinnacle fight to say that's the fight that Khabib rides off into the sunset. But with circumstances changing for him, it'd be nice to see him get one final win on his career and make sure he ends it with a clean record. Absolutely.
One of the best fighters to ever do it, Mitch. It's simple and plain as that. Have we got any more news to discuss today, Mitch, or we are going to ride off into the sunset ourselves?
I think that's a nice touch to lead on. Obviously, with that being announced today, it's good to see him returning, and hopefully we'll be returning soon with the preview. Of course, Derek Brunson is fighting, but back in Vegas, back in the small octagon, I believe. So that would be interesting. We've had the 30th octagon for a couple of weeks and a couple of events, but we're back in Vegas, back inside the Apex. But still, we've got a whole load of events coming up. We've got Bellator back, of course. We've got Brave coming up, where Mohamed Mokaev should be making his debut this week on August 1st, but he's had his sixth opponent pulled out in 14 days. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens come Saturday. And of course, we've got Dana White's Contender Series coming up, I believe, starting on Tuesday. So MMA, we had that little break for 4 or 5 weeks, but everything's coming back now. And of course, we'll be keeping you locked on MMA Latest. James, where can they find you on Twitter?
You can find me at Twitter at JamesSweetenham99. You can find me on Instagram at j.sweetenham99. I will be there at all times, Mitchell.
Definitely, and hopefully we'll be seeing you soon on the channel. I guess, we've got were you in second year of uni, weren't you? Going into your third year?
Going into the third year, Mitch, so I've got a bit more time to give you.
Definitely. We'll make the most of that, and hopefully you'll be able to get to see Whittaker fight once more again this year, maybe even twice.
Maybe even twice.
That Paulo Costa, he could fall out of that fight. Maybe Whittaker could step in on short notice. But no, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Of course, make sure to hit like. Make sure to comment down below. Of course, your thoughts of Darren Till versus Robert Whittaker. How did you score it? Did you score it maybe towards Till? Do you think it was a so-called robbery? But no, let us know your thoughts, of course, down below. We'll see you on the next video.